Hello. So, happy Monday. I'm just going to start with an apology, actually, because as I join this meeting, it always occurs to me it's Monday. It's the first point in the day. I was like, it's Monday. So apologies that the weekly priorities message will be late. I'll try and do it later today, but it might be tomorrow. So apologies for that. But in more regular news, MTTP is looking stunning. So great work, everyone. Thank you, Myra, for being a super release manager buddy. And also super exciting. So we're seeing here, what we're seeing is a combination of Kubernetes and bridge jobs, meaning deployments are fast, like real fast. And adding in Graham as well to the rotation is actually meaning that we're less impacted. I guess we've got a lot more flexibility around deployment blockers. So deployment blockers, I haven't updated last week's yet, but they look like they standardize around a pretty good week for us, has around 15 hours of deployment blockers blocked in. That's pretty much just time through EMEA and Americas as well, like Graham isn't tracking his blockers. So I think once we see this, we can start to standardize that. But what we're now getting is a lot more flexibility around being able to deploy earlier or later. Or there was one day last week where Graham kicked off a deploy like right at the end of his day, which is like way before I started. But you know, we're just being blocked up less on this stuff. So that's very exciting, and it gives us lots more kind of opportunities to keep pushing this stuff. So.
What is the actual number in that MTTP currently?
Yeah,
like what are we hitting?
We are hitting.
I think it is 8 hours.
Nice. So so yeah, it's looking pretty smart. What we will we'll keep pushing on the stuff and say like I think Skarbek summed it up nicely. Like 6 hours is the next one, right? But I did lower the official target back down to 12, even though we don't have 2 weeks without incidents, just because last week we had the key metrics meeting. I was like, this is going to look super weird if we're like, yeah, our goal is 24 hours and we're smashing through like 12 or 13 hours. So we can keep monitoring that, but it's looking really super for July.
I'm just wondering what we were doing in February 2020. So bad.
What were you all doing in February 2020? That looks like a rough month. So awesome. So let me see. So I've just left the out of office things on. I won't go through them each week, but just so you're aware of those. So discussion. So one thing I had on my mind this morning was I was just casually reading through some of the incidents that Myra had mentioned in our handover. And I was like, okay, here are all these things that there were conversations taking place left, right, and center around, we should make sure we get this revert into the release, or what should we do about the release? And I was like, wow, there are no release managers pinged on this. Those ones are fine because we saw them and we got them, but does anyone have great ideas like on what we can do to actually reduce the gap, I guess, between these things, right? Because there must be a load of stuff that slips through the cracks where people are having conversations, coming up with deployment strategies, but for some reason, just not pinging release managers. The special caveat on this one is without adding manual work. So yes, we could go through incidents or we could go through MRs or whatever, but we already have a ton of work, right?
So then why do you want us to be pinged to add to the amount of notifications that we as a team receive?
Well,
I guess here's my counter argument is that as so long as they know what needs to be done and it's being handled appropriately, do we need to be notified?
Yeah, it's a great point. No, it's actually the truth. Okay, no, we don't, provided it's handled appropriately. I think it's where so for example, this one I had this morning will end up totally fine because of deployments going smoothly, at least so far today. but we had already announced the guaranteed commit. So in theory, we could 14.1 could be Thursday's deployment, and I'm not sure. I hope people realize that, but I'm not sure if people realize that. But you're right. In actual reality, like, so I guess the sort of longer term thinking about this stuff is this process is going to become fully automated, right? And the release train will just begin, and it will just pick up whatever it has, and it will package it and release it. And at that point, like, it will have what it has. So I guess I'm kind of thinking like, what, but I love Skarbek's point that should we also have stuff in here to help people understand like more about this.
I guess if the concern is about making sure that we do or do not have the correct stuff into the latest release, maybe, I don't know if this is possible, but I'm brainstorming. If a revert occurs and it's within a time range leading up to the window where we start announcing the final date, maybe we could drop a message from DangerBot saying, hey, this is close to the release date. Consider notifying the release manager about a potential situation. And we'd have to define what that window is, and we'd have to make sure that DangerBot could recognize that this is a revert. I'm sure there's another scenario where someone may revert something, but it won't happen in a revert merge request. It would happen because they revert, say, a portion of it. So the word revert may not be in there at all. So I don't know how we would detect that. Outside of a documentation change, I'm not sure what else we could do.
How did you detect this AMER? Did you get ping, or did you just?
No, I literally was just reading the incident that you mentioned.
Oh, okay, got it.
You just mentioned there was an incident and it had been resolved, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll just take a look. And then I saw this whole thing, and it was like, hey, we're going to need to revert this. And we did. I was like, whoa, okay, like, yeah, that's I literally just stumbled across it, which is what made me think. I wonder how many of these things we just don't see at all.
Are we talking about merge requests?
I guess a question for you, Ruben, as someone who actually goes through this process outside the team, is like, is it clear from your developer experience, obviously not asking you to talk for everyone, but like once we start announcing the like guaranteed commits and things, like is the process clear?
So it takes a bit of time to properly understand it. So it's usually multiple readings of the release documentation where it mentions the guaranteed commit and then the candidate commit. But usually a few times where you have to ensure that some merge request of yours is included in a release. So then you really read the documentation a few times, then it's understandable. But if there's any way we can make it clearer, it would certainly help. But I was asking, are you talking about the merge request 66305? The one with enable FFCI scoped job token?
Maybe.
Okay. No, it is another one. That is another incident.
Okay, yeah, it's another one. Okay. We got 2 or 3, yeah.
Okay.
So at the moment, all of the MRs are merged and actually on production. So I think it will end up being fine, but it's close. That's the only thing. Okay. Well, hey, Ruben, this is going to be a super good one for you whilst you're here with us, is actually to like help us work through like how can we, like what do we need to take out of the documentation to make it shorter and easier to understand, and what do we need to add in to like announcements and things like that, so actually people can understand this a bit easier, because yeah, it's certainly complicated. Because yeah, in an ideal world, everyone will just self-serve this and we'll just know here's what's happened and here's what needs to happen next, or know when they can ignore it so that we can go on.
Yeah. I think we had spoken this during our one-on-one. You mentioned that there was probably an issue where we want to edit the documentation, sort of make it more clear and maybe shorter.
yes, I need to get that set up and do that. But yeah, I absolutely, there's a couple of things like, so reorganizing things so that we can make it easier to find stuff, but also I really want to, had a few people mention to me last week, unrelated to the release actually, but just generally that release tools is quite hard to drop in on, or like the release docs are quite hard to drop in on and get like a short overview. I think that'd be a really good thing that we can add in, which is like, you're not the release manager. You don't need to know all of this thing, but you do need to understand enough about what we're trying to do to actually put the stuff together. So yeah, I'll get some issues created ribbons because I think that would be, you're well equipped to help us with this stuff because basically you're the target audience. So get you going on that. Awesome. Cool. And then I guess on that, like I say, I think it's, well, it's just going to be education, I guess, as we go through these things. We'll have to just keep reminding people to ping release managers, and we can start pointing them to more documentation. Cool. I'll take a look through the ones we get in the next few days because I am wondering if there's some sort of sign, like if they are bugs or, you know, if we can indicate, if we can identify some common labels, at least on the majority of them, then I think the danger bot idea could work. So some of them may be bugs or things like that.
Probably an unpopular opinion would be that should we be notified about that? I mean, probably that's the reason why we have patch releases. If there is an S1P1, we should probably be aware of it because there might be an incident related. So I wouldn't worry too much about those. But if it is an S2 or an S3, then those can be included in a patch release, right?
Generally they can, yeah, generally they can. They, as always, migrations are the challenge, right? Like as every time. So yeah, but as always, we're very much reliant on people assessing the risk accurately, labeling them. So this one I was looking at here has no severity labels, so it's not going to help us. Okay, well, as I say, I think we should, like, I don't want to add in manual work, so I think these are ones where when we find we're doing manual work, we should try and see if there's anything we can do, or as I say, let's just educate and hope we don't have to do stuff like this. Awesome. Cool. And then the second thing, this is a slightly unstructured comment. I want to just give a bit of visibility though. So I am planning to add a comment into the Q3 OKRs. Actually, sorry, I'm missing my link. So that we can get these. I'm trying to work out the wording that will sort of fit these in. So the main change I'm going to do is to tie this closer to our strategy stuff. But I'll add an issue onto the, add a comment onto the issue so that Graham's got like all the same context as well. So there's two things I want to change here. So I don't think the actual like tasks will really change. I think like we know what we need to do for Kubernetes. We know what we need to do around MTTP. But I do want to tie this to our strategy. So I'll frame it around rollbacks, and that's the kind of big Q3 thing we have is hardening rollbacks. So we can pull those things together. And then the other one that's just come up, and this will be quite likely to be a platform level OKR, will be to work with scalability so we can tackle Redis. Now, sort of still working out what that might involve, but I think Redis, like GitLab and all these other pieces, is very unlikely to be something we could just lift and shift. So Chris is just like getting in the freezer. I think he's like broken. So it's very unlikely we'll be able to lift and shift any of the remaining things that are not like we're not already, like except for pages, right? So Redis and GitLab and all of these things are likely that we're going to have to do some like planning, try and move them, see what's involved, work with distribution. So we'll try and set up an OKR which actually gets us into a good place so that Q4 we can actually like start picking up and tackling some of these things. So I don't think it's any different. Like, yeah, I think it's exactly what we've been talking about with Gitly and Prefect, and also Redis as well. And one thing which we'll have to have a think about is, I won't put it in the OKR, but we'll need to have a think about is the big challenge that Myra and I have had in the last couple of weeks is scheduling in a production rollback is incredibly difficult. So we're going to need to find a way around that in order to actually achieve our rollback strategy. Basically, we're going to need to be able to roll back a bit more frequently, but it's not super easy to schedule these things in. Awesome. So is there anything else anyone wants to either comment on these things or on any additional topics?